Chapter 22, responsive styling. Okay, so basically, I have been mentioning responsive styling for a few times within this semester, and basically, responsive styling would be when you are looking at a page like this, and it's as large as your computer screen, most likely, laptop or computer. But let's say you wanted to look at the same page, but in a tablet, it might be this size. So then to keep all the content on the page, instead of having it run into the edge, responsive makes part of it go on the bottom. And basically you're doing that by making them float, and I'll show you that in a bit. Now, but let's say you're not using a tablet, you're using a cell phone. So it might be even smaller than that. So then the page would look something like this. So everything is, everything has been floated below the other content. And we'll be covering how to do that. And also notice that I have a media query so that the text will turn blue once it's a certain size. And that's a new thing that we'll be covering, media queries, within this chapter. Okay, so so that means that there's a couple of things that you have to do to make your pages responsive. And actually, there are many different options, to tell you the truth. In this chapter, we cover in this chapter we cover things that you might actually want to remove elements or remove a background, or you can even have a media query so that you can print. It's just a matter of formatting your content so that it meets the goal. So let's say it's a mobile device, and also remember too that mobile devices are still not as powerful. I mean, they're getting more and more powerful, of course, but they're not as powerful as your computer may be. So then you want to remove parts of the web page, like maybe a video or some sort of flash thing. So you can just kind of remove it from your page so that it doesn't show if you're using a mobile device. And it explains in this part here how the media queries, they test for things or for the size of the screen. And basically the media queries, instead of testing for the existence of something like the browser, because you can test if it's a certain browser. Is it Safari? Is it Firefox? Is it Chrome? You can do that, but and then you can check if it's different versions, but that's actually quite a bit of options there. So instead of searching or testing for the browser or the version, really what we focus on is testing for the size of the screen. So that way, because typically devices will be within a certain range, you'll have a laptop or a monitor that's a certain size, and then tablets are a certain size, and then cell phones are a certain size. So you really don't have to test for every possibility. You really only want to test for just a few of them. So in this part here, it actually shows the the sizes that you may be concerned with, or the ones that you should be concerned with. So you're not, having a million different options. So we're really just going to be testing for phones, tablets, and of course, when you're using a cell phone or a tablet, you can look at things portrait or landscape. So that's just another consideration. And then of course we have laptops and desktops would be a certain size. And I'll show you how to do that in a bit. Okay, So there are, just as a side note, there are some browsers and devices that will attempt to fit the entire page. So to prevent this, you would actually have a meta tag. I know we've mentioned meta tags before that provide information about your page. But this is actually a meta tag to prevent something from happening. So you would just put this at the top of your page, and let me go ahead and just do that. So we have this meta name, and always remember too that meta tags will always be in the head. And yeah, I actually already have it there. So here it is. It's in the head tags. Just like the style tags are in the head tags, so are the meta tags. And let me just go ahead and indent this a bit because it's inside of the head. Okay, so that's just to prevent devices from attempting to put the entire screen on there. Okay, so here are the media queries that I mentioned a minute ago. And basically it's just the @ sign, and then media. And then here, after media, is where you actually assign the certain limitations that you want. So you want to put only screen and max width, only screen, and there's so many different options too. As you can see here, only screen, and now we have a certain min width and max width, so those are the many different items that we can look at for the example in the book. But I want to also say that it doesn't even have to be as specific as this, because it says only screen and then the max width or min width. You can have something that's very simple, just like this, where you can put max width is 700 pixels. And that's actually the part that's going to be within our assignment, because I don't want to get too complicated like this here, since we're just starting off. Now, another thing that we're going to be using in this assignment is floating floating divs. And that will actually help automatically adjust the content depending on the window size. So we actually had float in a chapter previously, but I didn't cover it because I generally ran out of time. So I want to actually go back to it real quick. And it was in chapter 20, so you might want to go back there and review this. But basically, floating that attribute on an object can move it around a certain item. So for example, in this example here, we have 3 divs. We have 1, 2, and 3. So basically you can have this div float around this div. And that's basically what it's talking about. You can have something float around something else. It says parent object, so this could be the parent object, but all of these will float amongst each other if you have them assigned as floating. And you would do that just by putting, this is the div, so it'll apply to everything in divs, and then you just put float and then left. And there's different options there, but for now we're just going to focus on left. So anything that will have float and it doesn't fit, it will actually start the new row underneath. So as I showed this web page, remember all of these parts are divs. So this is one div, this is another div, and this is another div. When you reduce the size of the browser, it floats down to the next line. In the textbook, to tell you the truth, I think it is a bit more complicated than it needs to be, or at least just because this is the first and only time we'll be covering it in this class. I'm not going to be too specific on covering this part here. Things that I do see that are important, though, is this area here, because when you put a min width and a max width, you're actually saying that the divs or the areas that you're working with can be within a certain range of size. This is the page that I was looking at earlier. This is the page here that we're looking at. And again, this has 3 divs. The first div has a list. The second div has just content or a paragraph. And this one has an image. Now notice how I have one style that actually assigns a size for all 3 of them. You may actually want 3 different divs, just like in the textbook. There's a div, or there's a div for left, main, and then right. So we have left, main, and right. Okay, so but I only have 1 div. So, and it's just so that you can see, the differences between all of them. So if I have min width as 200 and max width as 350, that means that the divs here have the option of being, down to 200 or up to 500. And to illustrate that, let me go ahead and just notice how big the part where the list is. Okay, it's this size here. Now if I were to say that the minimum is 100, notice how this is going to be smaller. But then also know that the div is being assigned to all 3, so all 3 would be smaller, but you can really see it with the image because it'll overlap. So I saved and then refreshed, and notice how here this one is smaller. Now if I make it so that it's 300, then the minimum of the width would make this larger, and then this one would actually go into the next line. Okay, so that's the min and the max width. And then of course we have the float, and the float again allows it to go to the next line. So let me show you, let's say it didn't even have this float. And then I refresh. See how now it doesn't float, because remember the divs, they actually, and also notice here how this paragraph here doesn't even have a paragraph tag, but the reason why it's separated from the other 2 is because of the divs. So just like a paragraph tag would have space above and below, so does the divs. So the way we were doing it before, anytime we had a div, it would actually start the content on the next line on the next div. But this div, if you put float, it will actually float it on the next line. So if I do undo, I put the float back, and then I save and refresh. Now it is able to float and be responsive. Okay, now notice also that I have this blue color. This blue color here is because I have this media max width 700. So when you go less than 700, then that tells it, okay, well, it's a smaller device. I'm going to do some changes. Now to look at the change to look at a quick change, I just made it so that the font color is blue. So let me show you what happens if I take this off. I'm going to save and refresh. Now, any size that it is, no matter what it is, it doesn't change it to blue because we haven't assigned a certain media query for a certain size. So I save and refresh, and now when it's this small, it actually turns the text blue. And just like the textbook has, there's many different sizes that you can have and many different options, but I only want to, the assignment is only going to have just a few requirements. Okay, so this is what, this is the example in the book. They still have 3 divs, 1, 2, 3, and then a heading on top. And actually you're going to need a heading on the top for the assignment. But it's really just a matter of putting a heading one on top. So see, here's page. And we still have the divs down here, 1, 2, and then the 3 on the bottom. But notice how there's a heading on top of it. It's not in a div, but it is still a heading before all these divs. And since it's not a div, these other items won't be floating around it. It's just the heading by itself. Okay, let's see.